Hello, everybody. This is Jared, the non-alcoholic aficionado, and I am here today with Meagen Anderson, the CEO and founder of the Aficionado Certification Program. Thanks for joining, Meagen.
Thank you, Jared. Great to be here.
Well, we are going to be talking about NA beer today. We're going to be taste testing the Heineken 0.0, the Partake Peach Gose, and the Partake IPA. So let's kick it off with the Heineken and start the chat.
All right, let's do it.
I had a few of these the other night. I was axe throwing, and it was the only NA they had, so I had a few of them, and it was a nice combo.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about this. So when did you actually, in your journey, discover Heineken Zero? Was it the first time you went and they told you all they had was O'Doul's, and then you were pleasantly surprised when they found this? Because this is just like the best gateway AF beer, I think, out there, isn't it?
It really is. The first time I had it was at something called Whirly Ball, which is a thing where you ride around you ride around in bumper cars. You have a little basket thing. You use a wiffle ball, and you throw your wiffle ball up at a little basket. And that was where I had Heineken Zero the first time, and that was not until like last winter. So it would have been maybe 2 to 3 months after I started drinking NA beer and starting the channel.
Wow. Cheers. Yes, thanks for having me. This is just such a great beer. I love Heineken Zero because to me I can put Heineken Zero in front of, pretty much anybody who's never had an NA beer and get them to see how far the technology has come. A lot of people, this is not only is it available everywhere, but they just did such a really beautiful job, I think, emulating how nice these beers can be, how approachable they can be, how you can enjoy a lot of them no matter what you're doing. So I think they're just so good. And you probably noticed I was really looking at the beer. It still impresses me every time how this beer pours. And,
Yeah.
I find, and I don't know about you, but I find a lot of times when I pour AF and NA beers that have any type of hop character in them at all, and these like sort of international or import lagers certainly would have some hop character to them and some bitterness and aroma. It just really, it's got this nice kind of pillowy white foam. It stays there. It doesn't disappear right away and look flat or unappealing. And so when I'm out drinking it, I feel good. I feel like, hey, I've got a beer in my hand, and it is a beer, and it's something I'm always so excited to put in front of other people.
Yeah, and I like how, like you said, kind of approachable it is. It kind of covers all the, the bases for somebody that wants just a great drinking beer that's, kind of lighter, crisp, lager, just all around good beer.
And they're not easy to make. I think the other thing is it seems so easy. Like when you okay, Heineken made a zero, but to match what I've always just loved seeing happen as part of this movement is that Heineken put their own brand name on this. They didn't create something new. They went after people who have a love for Heineken and wanted, quite frankly, enjoy it in more places. And that's why I was so happy that we chose this beer, because it's meant a lot to me as a person who abstains from alcohol totally now and mostly drinks beer. Like, that's me. I haven't had a drink of alcohol in 4+ years, But every time I pick this up, I'm like reminded of why we probably had it, are in a place now where being AF and NA as a lifestyle is so much more feasible. And I don't think there's any accident when you hear Heineken spent 25% of their global ad budget this year on AF and NA beer, which is really, really interesting. How do we get to a world where that happens? And I think that just is a testament to these legacy brands kind of coming in. They've been watching the consumer. In the European market, AF and NA is already 15% of the business, and here in the US it's 1%. So yeah, I mean, I'm impressed by this. They're not easy to do, and I think they've brought something that really resonated with the American consumer. And they do, about half the sales of AF beer here in the United States. They just have, go anywhere, and you can assume, hopefully, if they have an NA beer, it's going to be a Heineken. Even though we have a long ways to go, the places we're finding it have this is one of the brands they've gravitated towards, which I think is really great.
Yep. So Meagen, what got you into the NA beer industry? I know you've kind of been in it for some time now.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. I mean, I know that's how we met. I was following, heard about some of the great videos you did and was super interested. So it's nice to meet other people that are doing it. But I haven't been only AF and NA beer in my career. I kind of ended up here. But my beginning of my career, I spent really like the last 2 decades in the professional brewing industry. I spent 10 years at Samuel Adams at the Boston Beer Company. I started there as an account manager, really as like the height of the craft beer boom started, So I was in Texas. I was part of a really big team of people. We had a lot of wholesalers and that side of the country. We're introducing them to craft. So I spent a lot of time there, and it was a great company to work for. Great team, great leadership. And one of the things that Boston Beer really at the tenet of its at its mission and vision was training and education and bringing people toward understanding what makes beer quality and good, and all of those things, and sharing in that. And I received a great deal of education when I was there in beer, including like everything from the history of beer and brewing to sensory training, and was able to become a certified Cicerone there. And so I didn't have much exposure to NA beer really until I became pregnant in 2016, which was a bummer, because I still wanted to drink beer, and kind of at that point, still it was pretty early. So like O'Doul's was the only option. So I was kind of like, nothing cool's happened here. I'd already been in the beer industry for about 10 years, and then I just kind of forgot about it. But then really interestingly enough, I left Boston Beer, and then I stayed in the industry. I worked in the hops industry globally for a few different companies. I worked for Calsec. I ran part of New Zealand hops business. So I got to commercialize Nectaron in the US with that team, and that was really fun. I did some work also in the adult use cannabis and hemp spaces, and many projects in between doing consulting. But my story in NA really is, the entry point was personal for me, because in the end of 2019, I had 2 small kids, and, my lifestyle in the craft beer industry had like truly, transformed me, but in a way that I didn't think was for the better, because it was just natural to have beer very in my proximity and in my world all the time. And it was very normal to start drinking beer early. The beginning part of the end part of my career at Boston Beer, I did beer education for North America. And that was a really cool job. I mean, I had the opportunity to travel all around the US and teach distributors and retailers all over how to become a Cicerone. And so it was a lot of touching product, all throughout the day. And then I would find myself, continuing to drink more, like after work, and going out and still being a part of the industry. And I just physically felt like something was wrong. And then the internal part really started, so at the end of 2019, I had probably tried, Jared, maybe 1,000 times over 20 years to stop, to control my drinking or moderate my drinking. And I've come to find out, a certain percentage of the population really struggles with that moderation. So I even though I kept feeling like I was failing, one of the last things I had not tried really was, abstinence from alcohol. Because I just didn't feel like I could still be a part of the industry. So it was really tied to my identity. Yeah. So after about 6 months of being alcohol free, in about mid 2020, I picked up I went to the store, I picked up some hop water and like a couple of NA beers. I believe Athletic was in there. I think it was Athletic Run Wild. And I might, maybe even another one. I don't really remember, but I think at that point it was Athletic. It was one of the only ones you could get. And I took it home, and I opened it. I'm like, I'm probably not going to like this, because I don't necessarily like the other ones that I've had. Yeah. And it was wonderful. And I felt myself as a Cicerone. I was like truly evaluating the beer for, from stylistically. I was looking at its, bitterness. I was looking at its aroma, and I was like, you know what? Like, hey, I don't like, there's things going on in here I haven't experienced before in regular beer, but that has to be different because it's NA. Yeah. And so I just kind of became sort of obsessed with it. I was like, I really like beer. I know a ridiculous amount about it, and I like the people and I wanted to add value, and I also realized that like part of that meant making NA beer cool and approachable for people, because I would go out after that. Then I started like seeking out NA beer, and I would go places and I would ask for a beer. I'm like, hey, do you have any non-alcoholic beer? And then after I got the look, what I'm talking about, like, why would you want, maybe we have an O'Doul's in the back. I was writing these down. Yeah. And I got to like 200 missed sales opportunities. And I felt like, as a person that had been in the industry for so long, I was like, I just can't not do anything about this. So what am I going to do? Then for the next 6 months, I just let it go. I just thought, someone else will figure out this problem. And I would go out And then I started doing my own research on NA. I'm like, wow, there hasn't been a lot of technology movement in this space for over 100 years. You know, what else is there that I need to know that I don't know? And then I come to find out, I start calling and asking my friends in the beer industry, like, tell me about NA, or people that were starting to get into it. Because around that time is when I think the transformation movement and the idea around becoming sober curious, leading to like maybe alcohol free as a temporary choice for people, like, hey, I only drink, you know, on the weekends now, or I take every January off or July, to, hey, I reevaluated my relationship with alcohol and I didn't really have a place for it. And that was like, by the end of 2020, it wasn't just me, there were others. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I started calling people in the beer industry. I'm like, what do you think about this? And they start telling me stuff. And I'm like, where did you learn this? And there was no book. There was no starting point to learn about AF and NA beer other than like snippets here, things from brand websites, you know, which none of those included process technology information of how the product was made, because that was IP or intellectual property and things that, you know, breweries wouldn't, just like they wouldn't tell you everything about how their house yeast strains and fermentation. They wouldn't release this because it's proprietary to the flavor outcome. And so I was like, well, I might know something about training. Maybe I could add value there. I was a beer educator. So then it just became really evident to me after going to like big chains and big stores. They had a lot of NA on the shelf by the end of the year. And I could tell when I would ask questions that no one had been trained. And so then I put in a call to Dr. Keith Villa, who has Saria Brewing now, but he created Blue Moon. And I asked him and his family, I'm like, what do you think? Do you think that this, you know, you guys have been around this movement for a while. Do you think it would be worth it to do an educational, like a certificate and a study program for this? And they were so excited and so supportive. And the term AFNA actually, you know, Keith actually kind of came up with that. He and his wife Jody on the fly when we were talking one day, like, AFNA, that's a good one. You know, I'm like, yeah, you're right, it is, and that's a thing. Like, how do we talk about this? There is a difference between AF and NA. So that's a long-winded way of saying, like, AF and NA beer found me as a category because I came to it through, just like you did, as a consumer, as a like fresh-faced consumer who had really made a lot of changes in my life, and I missed this part of my life. I missed connecting over a beer, and I thought to myself, how silly. Like, small beer and NA beer have been around for hundreds of years, but we just make it a weird thing here in the US, you know, because it's really not. And the only reason it's 15% of the category in other markets are because people are drinking a regular beer and then they're drinking their NAs or their AFs, you know, they're spreading it out. It's not a stigmatized part of their culture. It just is here. And, you know, and I think there's other markets where we see the same: Canada, Australia, the UK, you know, similar, very, very small markets now with a lot of opportunity to grow because those similar stigmas have existed. And those are really going away now really quickly. So I founded Aficionado Certification Program. Really got working on the project at the end of 2022. So in that time period, I kind of started blogging and writing a newsletter, and I couldn't get any traction. You know, it was like, there was a lot of people that had already done that. And so I decided it needed to be a certification after talking to Keith, and that would have been in 2022. So there was this period of like 2 years where I was interested, I was having a lot of conversations, and then I prayed about it. I'm a woman of faith, and I thought, you know, what should I do? Should I leave beer? You know, is it my time? Am I a dinosaur yet? Maybe I should just be gone. And I just had this really divine, you know, thought appear that was like, there's no AF and NA for, you know, like Cicerone or Somm for beer, wine, and spirits. You know, go make an AF version. That was like the thought. And that's what I started doing, you know, 2 years ago. And just recently I was flown to one very large national grocers meetings in Texas to teach 200 plus of their, you know, beer buyers and wine buyers about AF and NA beer, because it's such a significant part of their growth and their margin health as a retailer who gets a lot of revenue from the alcohol beverage category. So I think that it really just kind of was a blessing for me, because I don't think otherwise I would have been an AF and NA beer pro. I think that happened just as a result of like being very interested in it and refusing to accept the status quo, which is why I think some of the brands we're about to taste next are going to show that I wasn't the only one thinking that way. You know, many people were. And now we've got this entire category to lead, and you're a part of that with the work that you're doing, because so many people don't know much about AF and NA beer, and there's a whole world of things to know, and it is different than regular beer. So it requires special training, as you know. You know, I saw that you recently started studying for our exam, and I think that's wonderful, because that type of information is only going to help people grow in their confidence and their, you know, desire to approach these kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, and I think it was end of 2019 for me as well that I stopped drinking entirely, and I had sparkling water and hop water and a couple 0.0 beers that I was convinced had no alcohol in them, and because I was leery of the faint percentage that was there, and I thought that would like trigger me or something. I did, because no one ever told me about what the differences were. I didn't know. I just saw, you know, Total Wine's and non-alcoholic beer section had, you know, 0.5% beer, and I was like, I don't know if I can have that, and no one ever told me. So when I started to try stuff last October 2023, it was eye-opening, because it was like, this tastes really good. I'm not feeling any effects. I'm not getting drunk, and I'm not buzzed, and it tastes like the stuff I loved when I was big into craft beer. And you know, did the whole the tap room brewery hopping kind of thing for a number of years, and trying all the new stuff whenever I had the opportunity to try something new, I would. And you know, now I get to do that again, but from a sober perspective, and from a viewpoint of somebody that is, you know, trying to learn about what all is out there, and then educate through my channel, which is social media, including YouTube, and you know, connecting with people that are in the space like yourself to kind of further my knowledge. And it's just fun. Like it's a positive environment.
It is.
All the people that I've connected with, like we met on Facebook. You had commented on one of my posts. So I'm connected with people on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and it's just, there's a web of people that are like at this forefront of building. And I feel like, you know, 2-3 years from now, all the people that I've, you know, DM'd or messaged, or brands that are kicking off and getting started, like it's things are going to develop so quickly, I feel like. And I'm sure you've been abreast of that, you know, just in the past few months to, you know, maybe the last year or two for yourself as well.
Yeah, and I love it that you're saying that. I love it that you approached it from like how you feel. It feels fun to do this. It's an important part of this category's culture, is like, we're still drinking beer. It's just beer with 0.5% ABV, and that makes a world of difference when you are a person who loves beer. And you and I can speak, I think, very personally to that topic. And I think there's many other people out there, like you said, that are curious, and maybe just like us, we're very exploratory and, you know, in the craft sense in beer. And their relationship with alcohol has just changed. I mean, the data is so obvious, and it's people in our generation that are driving that change. It's millennial folks, it's people in Gen Z, it's people this whole movement has just shifted, in that people are okay with like not having a drink every day now. Maybe that's even their preferred choice. You know, 94% of the people that drink AF and NA still buy other alcoholic beverages, maybe for someone in their house if they don't drink, or for themselves, and weave it in. So it's an important category to know about, and it starts with education. Whether it's doing what you're doing, and you're one glass at a time pouring the product for people to have a look at, because this might take that stigma away for somebody who's like, oh, it looks normal, you know. And or that other question that you mentioned, should I have this? Yeah. It's 0.5% ABV. What does that mean? You know, and I'm like, that's an excellent question, because I think even I didn't understand the differences. I didn't know the difference between alcohol-free and non-alcoholic. I certainly didn't know things like, for example, that grape juice and apple juice on the shelf have more ABV, and bread and yogurt have a higher ABV than non-alcoholic beer by volume, right? So I think that was interesting. There's even been some experiments where people drank, I think a guy out of Indianapolis or in northern Indiana has an AF shop. I just heard he made a video chugging a gallon of orange juice and eating a pack of hamburger buns, and he blew over the limit. or Blue Near the Limit, or so. And it was like very interesting. I'm like, that's kind of showing you that, you know, alcohol and ethanol are definitely part of like the natural food process. Fermentation is a natural occurrence. These are sugar derived, you know, transformations that are happening. And the better informed we are, you know, we think about that, we buy what we eat and drink every day. And if you're somebody especially who is, I think what you and I really connected on was like that idea of like, there are other people out there that were in that situation that we were, and you miss it, and it's fun to be a part of it. And now you're bringing that social community back together around it. And I think it makes our category more diverse. And there's also an upside on the profit. You know, I think that's great. We're going to make more money doing this because now there's a business case. But one of the things I think I go to bed thinking about every night is like, how many more people out there would be like us and think, you know, maybe I don't want to approach that. Maybe it's not safe, or I don't know how to get any information. And that's what I think is like one of the most exciting parts about this category, you know, is seeing the people that are treating it as a standalone opportunity to learn and participate in beer. And that's a really, really good thing for I think all those producers. There's over 9,000 breweries in the US. And I think those businesses deciding to offer it or play in the category on their own, you know, having a hand in that affects every single person that interacts with those brands or goes into those places. And that's really quite powerful.
Yeah. The fun thing I run into is people like commenting on my videos or sending me direct messages on LinkedIn after I post something about a conversation I had or an interaction. I've had actual like friends that I used to drink with say, "Hey, I'm sober now. You know, we used to, you know, throw them back in the day. Maybe it wasn't the best plan of action at the time, but now I don't drink." And I've had other people comment on my Facebook or on the YouTube videos and like, "Hey, I didn't know this was an option. I went out, I bought it for the first time. I liked it. Thank you so much." And it's like, I didn't do anything besides talk to the camera for 10 minutes, put it on YouTube, and away we go. Now it lives on YouTube forever, and people can search for Blue Moon and watch the Blue Moon video that's 4 minutes long and learn about something maybe they relished when they were drinking standard beer like I was.
Yeah, so I think that's amazing. So fun, and people are going to learn that way. Yeah, I'm ready to. Let's move on. Like you picked another good one today. Yeah, I'm excited to taste this one.
I haven't had this one in a bit, and this Peach Gose is one of my favorite of the category. So this is done by Partake, which is out of Canada, and they were actually a part of the Canadian Shark Tank style pitch back in, I think it was 2017 with Ted Fleming, and they've since gotten pretty big. I was just at Total Wine over the weekend, and they have a 5-foot by 10-foot wall on an end cap of the Partake Brewing offerings. It's pretty cool.
Wow. I mean, this to me, cheers, by the way. What a great choice. I mean, I just think this brand is very unique. I want to talk about the beer first because I could go on about I have other things I want to say about this, but this is so interesting and this is so good. And much like Heineken to me, this beer, if you put this in front of a regular beer drinker, I think they would have a really hard time telling what the ABV level was in something like this, that it wasn't even 3%, like it's got so much body to it. It's bright. Goses by their nature. Let's see what's in here. So we've got coriander in here, some natural peach flavoring, a little bit of sea salt, which we would expect, and some wheat, right? So we've got all those like kind of classic components in there. The coriander really makes this beer deeper to me.
It does.
And I mean, we haven't talked about the fact, maybe you should tell everyone, because this just feels like cheating. How many calories are in this thing?
You'd think about 55, right? Maybe 60?
I'd say 55, 60.
Yep, 25.
Yeah, 25 calories.
Isn't that
wild? Come on.
Yeah, I don't know how it's possible. You probably know how it's possible.
Well, yeah, it's all possible through methods and adding complexity into something that, as a brewer, a traditional brewer, to get that level of aroma to carry through and to get that level of authenticity of flavor, it just takes refining. And clearly these guys have done it. I don't know a ton about, and shame on me, Ted, if you see this. I should know more about your brands because we've met a few times and talked about them. I don't know the method specifically that they use. I haven't looked at the website before I came here today. If it is fermentation, because it says here that the beer contains yeast in it. So if there's been some sort of fermentation that was halted, I mean, there's not a lot of carryover of negative flavor, which would be the next thing you would look for. Like if you're going to make a beer through a fermentation method, I think one of the biggest challenges for an AF and NA producer is, especially in those biological methods where you're using a yeast strain and you're putting a lot of pressure on the yeast to do something they weren't necessarily designed to do, or you're reaching for a yeast strain that was designed to do something different, which is not ferment the beer fully. So you're planning to stop that process. And I don't care what you say about that, like that's going to produce a range of flavor, inputs. If a person may think that that's not as good or maybe a very superior way, it's still going to produce flavor inputs that are different than traditional brewing. So that's the trick. Can you do it? And can you call it a style of beer that it actually emulates? And I think Partake has done this in this. I mean, the aroma is good. It's got mouthfeel. I think the salt and the coriander add, grip and body to this beer. But to me, I think the one thing I would share with people today that makes it excited for me as a person who's paying attention to this, it says 25 calories in it. Yeah. I think only Partake and Brewdog, I think, are sort of taking that stance on the market, which is low calorie, taking this different approach of sessionability of these types of beers. I mean, if I could drink 4 of these for 100 I couldn't even drink that much in one sitting. That's actually at a volume which would be so difficult. So it's so good.
That's like that's like 1 ounce of cheese, and you get four beers out of it.
So you bring up another good point. What would you pair this with? Like if you were eating something, what would you put this with that you like to eat?
I could do a cheese plate. Kind of a lighter fruity beer with some like fig jam and some
nice
crackers and maybe some, I don't know, like some salami and some salty cheese. I don't know.
You sound like an aficionado now, Jared. This is like too good. Yes, all of those things that we would traditionally have paired with a beer. Cheese is great because it's got a lot of fatty character to it. And so when you're drinking, you've got carbonation bubbles that can kind of lift and scrub your palate. You've got salt and tartness that kind of slice through some of that as well and kind of break it up like with a brie or something. This is really going to just kind of lift up those notes. And like you said, adding a jam or something else is just going to continue to add complexity to this beer. Like every time you take a bite, and it's truly guilt-free. And what an awesome beer to put in front of basically anybody, even if they say they don't like beer. I would have them try this.
This kind of bridges. It's not a sour. It's not a lager. It's definitely not anything hoppy, and it's not really like a Belgian white. It's kind of like an amalgamation of a few different styles in my mind. I don't know a whole lot about Gose as its own right, but from an outsider's point of view, someone not having had it, they could approach this in a lot of different ways from their previous experiences.
Yeah, so Goses are really interesting. They're more of that Belgian Flemish style background. They were farmhouse type of beers. When we hear about Saison, Saison meant season. So you were typically brewing these with like herbs or spices from your farm. And Goses were very similar to that. They were brewed basically, they were actually predated the use of hops in many cases, or in regions where there was difficult access to hops. So it's really interesting. If you look at how these Goses were originally brewed, oftentimes they would put Berliner Weiss is very similar to this too. They would brew them without any hops in them at all, and then they would use like coriander and salt and other things to basically cut through the sweetness and make them more palatable. So this souring would have happened by the natural conditions around the brewery. It would have just soured the mash, and then you're kind of flavoring it. And then of course we're adding wheat to this. So when you mention like the style, this is truly a really unique take on an ale, and like almost very similar to that Belgian wit style, but just adding kind of that real sour kind of character and having all those things come together. And then of course having sea salt in there is a very classic style for Goses. You would find that in there. That's signature to their style.
Yeah. So curious, Meagen, where do you see this space in 3 years? I know it's probably going a lot of places fast, but what's your prediction?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have a long way to go. I think in 3 years we'll be saying like we're still growing, in craft. For craft, our growth trajectory took, some time. It happened over the course of, gosh, it was still growing pretty gangbusters. Even didn't even really stop in 2016 after I left Boston, and I'd been there almost 10 years. So I think in 3 years we are seeing definitely more established craft brand analogs, where we've got craft brands that are putting their name and trying to emulate a style, or potentially everybody would have that has a potential to add it in their portfolio that has that capability probably will. And what I really think I see more so is that for brewers, smaller brewers, I think there's a lot of pressure on smaller brewers and regional brewers in the US over the next 3 years, because imagine what this is doing to their trends. I think it's all good for us because you and I are in this space, but if I think about the breweries that are out there that need to adapt, and they're already making great beers, they've already created a signature flavor style, but unfortunately I just think if you don't have this offering in the next 3 years, the social venues in which we enjoy these beverages will look much different, because many of them may go away, because the way that people choose to integrate alcohol mindfully into their lifestyle is changing. And I don't think that means it's just gonna it's a bad story. I think that we all have to realize and try to integrate the fact that people are making this choice, and the ones that do it with the best level of selection and education combined will be the most profitable, and from either a brand or retailer perspective will enjoy the benefits of that growth. But it will continue to grow at a very rapid rate until it's probably 12 or 15% of the business. Yeah.
That's exciting. I like the idea of having more options. I know I've been doing some brewery hopping over the past few weeks here as we've gotten nicer weather in Minnesota, and some have been some of their own NA beers that they've created alongside like ABV technology and through their own methods, but also like one brewery I went to had some athletic brewing. They had 5 different athletic brewing beers in their fridge, so I had a couple of those. So I'm curious to see locally, like, are the non-alcoholic standalone breweries like Go Brewing and others that only do NAs, where are those going to pop up, and how is that going to affect the local scene in some place like Minneapolis, St. Paul here in Minnesota that has so many craft breweries? So that's what I'm excited for.
Oh, that's so great. I love that you mentioned Go Brewing. I just went there a couple weeks ago, and I like their team. Yeah. I think that they have they have so many different styles, and I think that gets into what you were talking about. They've got that variety, and it's accessible. And as it becomes more mainstream, that just carries over. It wasn't unusual for us to try to have 7 or 10 facings of Sam Adams on the shelf when I was there. And I think the established brands will block and tackle very similarly, but it's cool because they can go places that regular beer can't. And I think that that's something else that's very interesting. I think in 3 years, would it be that unusual that you and I go to a Planet Fitness and there's a bar in there, selling only AF and NA drinks, and that becomes a social venue? That is something that I think, will be very interesting, and the future I think we'll just see the venue situation change in terms of like where we drink and how we drink and consume, especially on the abstainer side. For those of us that are like lifestyle driven and taking these, we're bringing them into new venues that like you haven't seen before. I took them into church. I took NA beer to an event at my church, and it was really wonderful because you saw people, first of all, look shocked. But the point was supposed to be there, that this brings people together in these types of situations to come around one another and enjoy a drink, and eat and drink together, and I think that's good for all of us in so many ways. When we think about how important it is to spend time together and be in a supportive environment, it's also really nice when you can eat and drink the things you like to and share them with people no matter where you are. And that is another area where I think NA and AF can play a really important role.
I think you struck a chord there with me. Partake is a sponsor of the Association of Pickleball Players, and I love pickleball.
Oh yeah, that's right. Cool.
And I'm thinking to myself, you just mentioned bringing it into a place where you have, one of your go-to, places to be with people. When I used to play a lot of pickleball, it was a lot of athletic type folks, and I could see showing up with, some Partake Brewing from a pickleball point of view, and dropping in and letting them try it. And I think they would, after they're done playing, give it a try and see, and they'd probably like it.
Yes, you would be. So many people will want to try it, and I think that's again where there's a lot of opportunity. I think tastings are really important, and exposure to people and awareness of what these taste like and that they are good, and people are trying the craft ones to see that they're very similar. Yeah, I think that's good. I have another question for you, and you don't have to answer it now, but what brand would you love to see make an NA of what and which beer would you have them remake if it was an existing one? I'm very interested.
Ooh. I would probably say something from Surly.
Wow.
Surly's a local Minnesota brewery. They've been part of my, actually this is a Surly glass. I'd say maybe like Surly Furious IPA, or a Bell's Two Hearted Ale, or a Bell's Hop Slam. The Bell's Hop Slam was kind of like my holy grail beer. It was a 10% double IPA. And I know there's ways to make a 10% beer come down to 0.5. I know, like, there's folks that can do that. That one came out around my birthday every year, and that was like my birthday present to myself, was to go buy a $16 or $17 six-pack of that and give it a try. But yeah, if I could experience a big flavorful double IPA or a stronger IPA in NA format, that's probably what I would go for.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm glad you said that. I love Bell's. Yeah, they have a great team. I've heard that they're interested in this space too, and I always wanted them to make one called, let's see. So they've got the Two Hearted, and I think I wanted to call it
Oberon.
Yeah, Oberon is really good too, but I had made up a name for myself that went along with Two Hearted. It was like No Hearted or something, or like Heartless. I wanted to name a Bell's beer Heartless and make it an NA because I thought that would be funny, like it saying that it was gone, but then people would taste it and it would be really good. I'll have to tell my friends over there about that one. But I think Bell's has a really interesting, portfolio. I thought about Lawson's, like Sip of Sunshine from Vermont. I thought those beers were always so delicious. I would love to see, similar to you, some of those classic New England hazies, or even classic West Coast styles, which I don't think will ever happen, that we would see like a Russian River, Pliny the Elder Zero. But I also never thought I would see Firestone Walker do one, or Shiner, and Sam Adams and all these other breweries, and they've done a really good job. So I hope that's what we end up seeing. So yeah, that's cool.
I could also think of like Dogfish Head. They've got some interesting stuff that would be cool to have as NAs. But yeah, I don't know. I just look at like Deschutes having come out with their Fresh Squeeze IPA that was, right up my alley and one of my go-tos back when I drank, 4.5 years ago. And now they've got that in the market, and it's so good. I've had it multiple times on videos. So yeah, and plus, you've got the Belgian White from Blue Moon. When that came out, that was huge for me because that was like one of my mainstays.
Cool. Good.
So, and then having Guinness being so good in the NA format with the Guinness Zero, it's just nice to be able to fall back on things that you taste similar to what what you had back in the day. So I kind of like blend what I do from an exploration perspective. I kind of fall back on ones I know are good and that I can rely on, but then I spend probably 2/3 of my time when it comes to purchasing and trying NA beer with new stuff that I've never had, and then I'll bring it to the forefront of tasting videos or what have you. So I think of like the mash gangs that came out from the US distribution perspective, or ones from Go that I hadn't tried yet. I bought a bunch of those and did like a 4-stage kind of review session. So I don't know, I'm toying around with different ways to do these videos and try new things, and I'm really liking this format to get kind of an educational perspective from people that have such ingrained experience in the space, while still tasting from a distance, versus only having people that I know in the Minneapolis area. So this has been fun doing these sessions.
Yeah, I love that. No, it's a great way to explore, and it's interesting because you don't like everything that you try, and some of that's True. Just I like or dislike, and in part of it, AF and NA beer is still process. I think the focus on quality, and that's why these are important. It's important to do these tastings so that we can describe what we taste and make that, and kind of make that known in this regard. Everything we had today has been so beautiful and so delicious, and it just makes me, again, every time I do a tasting, I get more excited about the future because it means other people will taste what we taste. So it's great.
How about this one?
Let's do it. Yes. Oh my gosh. I see the calorie count. I'll save the drum roll for you on that one.
Do I get to reveal?
You get to reveal. You get to reveal because it's actually more insane from what we just did.
I know, right? It's funny. When I did my first couple videos, I was connected with a friend on LinkedIn, and he put my name in front of the Partake founder, Ted Fleming, and Ted sent me 5 of their NA beers to try, and that was one of my first review videos, was the Partakes, but that was 7 months ago, so I got a lot ahead on mine. Whoops.
Mine poured really nicely, and look at the color. I mean, it's just got very interesting dark, rich colors, and I mean, when we say dark, it's got that amber, kind of that amber color. Maybe like there's some C60 in here, caramel 60 malt, which is like very common way for brewers to try to add a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of mouthfeel. It's not fermentable, so it's just quite tasty. What is it?
This has so. I just took a little sip out of the can because I didn't want to pour the rest into the glass. It has so much flavor, and it's got actual like true bitterness to it as well. It's there. Okay, the reveal.
The reveal. How does it have this?
10 calories. How is that possible?
I know. I mean, it is, but this to me is a testament to being able to use science and technology and sensory to guide yourself toward a very difficult thing to achieve, which is this type of flavor in a beverage in a beer format that's 10 calories. I mean, that contradicts itself, and you could put this in front. I mean, there's a big bitterness grip here. So whoever's watching this, if bitter IPA was not, the bitterness of the IPA, because there is difference in the body, when you don't have as much ethanol, but it's very balanced. I mean, other than knowing I'm tasting something that doesn't have 0.5%, we've got a tremendous amount of hop character on the nose also. And I'm not as familiar with how Partake is doing hopping, but I mean, however they're making the hops are making their way into the beer, it's being retained, and it's definitely getting some of that green like myrcene character. I mean, it's bright hop character, like I'm smelling out of a bag of hops, and that's a really interesting, refreshing characteristic to get in a beer that's 10 calories. I mean, it's kind of mind blowing to me. I mean, I would choose personally something like this over a hop water any day because there's that much neutrality in the choice. It's like I can have a hop water that has 0 calories, or I can have a Partake, and I'll even throw Brewdog back in the mix. Brewdog's beers, they're making it in a similar style, but also what I love about what Brewdog's done is they're putting their names on it, right? So they've got like an Elvis AF, which is their grapefruit, but they're all about 25 calories. And 2 grams of carbs or so. And I think there's going to be a market for this. So I think what Partake has done is really excellent. This is amazing quality. And I think you'll find that there's a market of people like me. I like to drink several beers, throughout the day because I'm like eating it with my lunch. I'm like, what pairs with this? What do I have? So for someone like me, I think a brand you could do the math and figure out you're gonna end up in my rotation because this is something I can consume, get a lot of flavor from, have that craft experience, pair with food, do all the things, and I'm not sacrificing anything. If anything, I feel like how is this real? Like, this is crazy. So nice job to those guys, because I think this is the most surprising beer that we had today, and I think also kind of showing in the direction we can go in, and this is something that we would give to our friends that really liked an IPA and be like, I'm not missing out on anything. And I think that they, other than getting over the initial difference of like a beer that's got 10% of its composition is ethanol and one that has 0.5, everything else translates. And that's a really powerful part of the technology in this space. So these are really great, Jared.
Totally agree. And it should be noted, the Partake brand has a number of other offerings. I think they now have like a Mexican cerveza style. They did a Hefeweizen. They've got the blonde. They have obviously the peach goes in the IPA. They've got a pale. They've got a Dunkel. What else?
Wow.
They have a red. So they have at least 8, maybe more that I'm not thinking of. Which is a pretty good variety for a standalone, a non-alcoholic only brewery. That's they're definitely taking the bull by the horns, which is cool.
Yeah, you hear Dunkel and you're like, wow, who's making that in this category? I mean, I think that's just to kind of come full circle. That's where craft is going to transform the space for NA. I mean, it'll just be either brands that we already know and love that'll carry some of these flavors over into a more sophisticated AF format, or vice versa, that we'll get some of these new breweries that are going to go after the tough styles, and that's the best part of what we're doing. And I think that I go back to what we envision, and thinking about being able to go sit in a beer garden all day and drink 8 or 10 different styles of beer over the course of an afternoon with friends, and be able to drive home and spend time with my kids and build my personal relationships and succeed in work and life, because I'm living a healthy, balanced lifestyle that works for me, and the relationship I have with alcohol is possible for everyone, which is really cool.
Yeah, I had a fun weekend. I think I mentioned at the beginning, I did axe throwing Friday night. I had 4 zeros. And then I did some brewery hopping over the rest of the weekend. And Summit, which is one of the largest Minnesota breweries, they have their Nealis Irish Dark and IPA. And I think I had, was it yesterday? No, it was Saturday. I think Saturday I had like 4 at Summit. And they're really, really good beer. So it's nice to be able to be social, be out and about, not have to worry, like you said, about any of the ramifications or side effects or issues or anything that goes along with having too many beers, and still being able to be a part of the fun. So that's one of the best parts about it.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that I look forward to doing this with you again. I'd love to come on again and talk about more in-depth and process. I think today we got a really good example of a really large multinational brewery and some of the methods of producing like a true alcohol-free 0.0, which is like no detectable alcohol, versus the realm of possibility inside of making beers through hybrid or other mechanical methods that allow you to make a really great beer at that 0.5%, because that there is a difference. And I think there's a market for both parties, and also just kind of understanding like, why do these beers taste the way they do. But what a great way to get started today, and I really hope we're able to do this again in the future. This is great.
I would love to, Meagen. You're a wealth of knowledge. I hope everybody that's watched today is taking something away. Maybe they went out and bought one of these beers to try on their own, or they ran into a Heineken Zero at the local venue. Maybe axe throwing, maybe whirly ball, maybe a costume. And they thought, well, Meagen and Jared thought it was good, so maybe I'll try it. So who knows? We'll see. See what happens.
I think we're making the summer better for people, one NA beer at a time. I love it.
Yep. Cheers to that. Thanks for your time, Meagen.
Cheers. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching. Bye-bye.